yet keeping his voice to the professional low pitch of a sick room. He put his strong, firm hands under my elbows, raised me to my feet and supported me to a chair, for my feet were like pieces of wood. I could hardly lift them. "How long have you been kneeling there?" he demanded. "You would have fainted away if you had stayed there much longer." "I do not know," I replied faintly, "but it doesn't matter. Tell me, is my husband all right, and how badly is he hurt?" "He is not hurt seriously at all," the physician replied. "The bullet went through the fleshy part of his left arm. It was a clean wound, and he will be around again in no time." He walked to Dicky's bed, bent over him, listened to his breathing, straightened, and came back to me. "He is doing splendidly," he said, "but you are not. You are on the point of collapse from what you have undergone tonight. You must lie down at once. If there is no one else to take care of you, I must do it." I felt as if I could not bear to answer him, even to raise my eyes to meet his. I do not know how long the intense silence would have continued. Just as I felt that I could not bear the situation any longer, Lillian Underwood came into the room, bringing with her, as she always does, an atmosphere of cheerful sanity. "What is the matter?" she asked. Her tone was low and guarded, but in it there was a note of alarm, and the same anxiety shone from her eyes as she came swiftly toward me. "Mrs. Graham is in danger of a nervous collapse if she does not have rest and quiet soon," Dr. Pettit returned gravely. "Will you see that she is put to bed at once? Mr. Graham will do very well for a while alone, although when you have made Mrs. Graham comfortable, I wish you would come back and sit with him." Lillian put her strong arms around me and led me through the door into the outer hall. "But who is with Miss Draper?" I protested faintly, as we started down the stairs toward the first floor. "Her sister and one of the best trained nurses in the city," Lillian responded. "Besides, Dr. Pettit will go immediately back to her room." "But Dicky, there is no one with Dicky," I said, struggling feebly in an attempt to go back up the stairs again. "Don't be childish, Madge." The words, the tone, were impatient, the first I had ever heard from Lillian toward me. But I mentally acknowledged their justice and braced myself to be more sensible as she guided me to her room and helped me into bed. I found her sitting by my bedside when I opened my eyes. Through the lowered curtains I caught a ray of sunlight and knew that it was broad day. "Dicky!" I said wildly, staring up from my pillows. Lillian put me back again with a firm hand. "Lie still," she said gently. "Dicky is fine. And when you have eaten the breakfast Betty has prepared and which Katie is bringing you, you may go upstairs and take care of him all day." "But it is daylight," I protested. "I must have slept all night. And you, have you slept at all?" "Don't bother about me," she returned lightly. "I shall have a good long nap as soon as you are ready to take care of Dicky." "But I meant to sleep only 2 or 3 hours. I don't see how I ever could have slept straight through the night." I really felt near to tears with chagrin that I should have left Dicky to the care of anyone else while I soundly slept the night through. Lillian looked at me keenly, then smiled. "Can't you guess?" she asked significantly. "You mean you put something in the mulled wine to make me sleep?" "Of course. You have been through enough for any woman. Dicky was in no danger, and I had no desire to have you ill on my hands." I flushed a bit resentfully. I was not quite sure that I liked her high handed way of disposing of me as if I were a child. Then, as I felt her keen eyes upon me, I knew that she was reading my thoughts, and I felt mightily ashamed of my childish petulance. "You must forgive my arbitrary way of doing things," she resumed, a bit formally. I put out my hand pleadingly. "Don't, Lillian," I said earnestly. "I'll be good, and I do thank you. You know that, don't you?" Her face cleared. "Of course, goosie," she answered. "But I must help you dress. Your breakfast will be here in a moment." I sprang out of bed before she could prevent me, and gave her a regular bear hug. "Help me dress!" I exclaimed indignantly. "Indeed, you will do no such thing. I feel as strong as ever, and I am going to put you to bed before I go to Dicky. But tell me, how is—" She spared me from speaking the name I so dreaded. "Miss Draper is no worse. Indeed, Dr. Pettit thinks she has rallied slightly this morning. She is resting easily now, has been since about 3 o'clock when Dr. Pettit went home." I was hurrying into my clothes as she talked. "Have you found out yet how it happened?" I asked. "I know that Harry does," she answered. "He says that yesterday the girl appeared, as calm, even cheerful as ever, went with him to the manager's office, performed her dancing stunt as cleverly as she did the other night, and in response to the very good offer the manager made her, asked for a day to consider it. As she was leaving the office, she asked Harry if Dicky were in his studio, saying she had left there something she prized highly and would like to get it. Something in the way she said it made Harry suspicious. Of course, I had told him confidentially of her attempt to drown you, so he remarked nonchalantly that he was also going to the studio. He said she seemed nonplussed for a moment, then coolly accepted his escort. They went to the studio, and Harry stuck close to Dicky, never permitting the Draper girl to be alone with him for a minute. After a few moments she bade them a commonplace good by and left, but she must have stayed near by and cleverly shadowed them when they left. At any rate, she appeared at the door of our house shortly after Harry and Dicky had entered. Harry wanted to get some things before coming out to Marvin again, and asked Betty to see Dicky. Unfortunately, Harry was in his rooms and did not hear the request, so that Dicky went into the little sitting room off the hall with her, and Betty says the girl herself closed the door. What was said no one knows but Dicky and the girl. Harry heard a shot, rushed downstairs, and found Dicky, with the blood flowing from his arm, struggling with the girl in an attempt to keep her from firing another shot. Harry took the revolver away, unloaded and pocketed it, and could have prevented any further tragedy only for Dicky's growing faint from loss of blood. Harry turned his attention to Dicky, and the girl picked up a stiletto which Harry uses for a paper cutter. You know he has a house filled with all sorts of curios from all over the world, and drove it into her left breast. She aimed for her heart, of course, and she almost turned the trick. I imagine she has a pretty good chance of pulling through if infection doesn't develop. The stiletto hadn't been used for some time, and there were several small rust spots on it. But here comes your breakfast." Her voice had been absolutely emotionless as she told me the story. As she busied herself with setting out attractively on a small table the delicious breakfast Katie had brought, I had a queer idea that if it were not for the publicity that would inevitably follow, Lillian would not very much regret the ultimate success of Grace Draper's attempt at self-destruction. End of chapter 28.